All right, cool. So how are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. I'm acclimating back to being on normal New York time. You can kind of hear my throat's a little scratchy. I feel like I can't travel without catching like a tinge of something. And this go round, I thought like I was safe, but I got like a little bit of a cold towards the end. So that's why I sound a little raspy.
No, yeah. I mean, honestly, like you're around so many people and then like airports and traveling and then the time change?
So many, yeah, your body goes through so many like back and forths, and it's like so dependent. Like a good day is so dependent on having a good night's sleep. And then like you're in the makeup chair and people are in your face, and it's a
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. Like people are like literally like this close to your face, like staring at. I know. That's like emergency like packing and stuff like that.
no, it really is. Yeah, I'm really big on like what is it called? That brand, Airborne. You know, the Airborne take for like immune boosters. I love those.
Yeah, I'm surprised they kind of don't sponsor like a fashion week, like models or something. You know what I mean? Like that could be like a good like cross like promotion.
Honestly, if they've not done that, that's an untapped like opportunity. And
Yeah.
Airborne, hit me up.
Yeah. They need to listen to this. I know, honestly. Well, yeah. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming to the podcast. This is like a super exciting episode to have you. But like, let's get into it. Like, so go ahead and tell me, like, where are you from and like, how long have you been modeling for?
So, do you want like where I'm originally from, or do you
Yeah.
want the
I want
complete?
to know like where you're from. Did you want to model as a kid? Like, how'd you come to New York? Like, how'd you start this? Like, let's start from the beginning.
Okay, whole 9 yards. Okay.
Yeah.
So originally, I'm very much a Southern girl. I'm from North Carolina. My family's still there. They're kind of like on the outskirts of like the Raleigh area.
Okay.
And I love North Carolina. Honestly, moving from there, it's kind of hard to part with because it has so much to offer. Um,
Mhm.
like it's everything. It's got the beach, it's got the mountains, it has incredible like industries. You can do everything from like agriculture, tech, like whatever you're into. But the one
Mhm.
thing it doesn't have is like fashion. Push.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
it has like a niche of fashion, I would say, but it's not anything like what I'm into. I will say though, I definitely the camo, I kind of pick and choose from that a little bit. So I do appreciate those parts of my southern roots. But like the hey dudes, I don't know if you know what hey dudes are, that trend.
No.
Yeah, they're kind of, I mean, honestly, I think at this point it's kind of like fizzling out, but it's just a type of shoe that just has Southerners in like a chokehold.
What? What is it?
It's like do you remember when Toms were a really big thing? They
Yeah.
might be like part of Toms, if I'm not mistaken. Nah, I might be though. But they're just like slip-on shoes, kind of
Mhm.
like and slip-on shoes, but they just kind of have like a little bit of a spin on them that Southerners just love. I don't know what it
Oh
is.
my gosh, I have to ask because like my parents live in Florida, but I mean, I don't know if you consider that South?
Fake South.
Yeah, it's like the jungle at the end of the country.
So that's
Literally.
how Florida. I feel like Florida is kind of a mixed bag, and it's fun for that reason.
No, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. No, but originally from North Carolina, love it there. My whole family's still there. Actually, this is going to shock you. I just moved to New York about a year and a half ago. Not even.
Yeah, no, I feel like I saw that because I'm like on your Instagram. I was like, holy shit, like only a year that like and a half. That's really cool? And like good for you?
Mhm.
So
New
yeah,
York,
you've only been here a year and a half.
yeah, it's so super recent. New York's been really good to me so far. I feel like a big part of me moving to New York, I wanted to make sure that it was going to be like a successful endeavor for both myself and my husband because I am married.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like when you're in a marriage in particular, like you want to make sure that both parties feel fulfilled. Because if we had just moved up here for like, Riley's fashion career and it had been me just kind of like pulling him along, that would not have been like a good thing for him. And then vice versa, he doesn't want to drag me anywhere that I don't want to be. So we ended up getting really lucky and he actually got a job that's based in the Northeast. So
Okay.
worked out perfectly for both of us and it was kind of like a good stepping stone for him in a direction that he's been wanting to get into, so it was
Hmm.
really beneficial.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I really do, I love everything about New York. I feel like I love it for the stereotypical reasons and I love it for everything in between, the good, the bad, the ugly. I do have some days though where I can feel myself like when I'm ready to spend a few days or a weekend back home, it's usually when I'm like crossing the street and I see someone with, like a bag of trash or like a weird look in their eye and they just look like they're up to no good and I'm like half a second away from like shaving my head and I'm like I need to go back home and visit family. So,
No, I get it. Like, I miss like driving in a car, you know? Like, I don't know if you have a car, but like, there's something like so nice about like going and doing errands like in a car that you just don't have in New York. Cause if you are running errands in New York in a car, it's like a nightmare and like you don't even want to do it, you know?
yeah, no, I completely agree. And like sometimes my girlfriends from back home will be like, "Oh, I love New York in the summer. Like New York's so cool." I'm like, "Girl, you have not run errands in New York in the summer."
I know. It's like so sweaty, so gross.
It's hard, and maybe this is just me, but for me, like I think it's difficult to look cute at a certain point in the summer. It's usually like mid-July to mid-August where I'm just like 3 seconds away from running around the city in a bikini. You know what I mean? Like it just gets
Yeah.
wet.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because like I'm also like a Southern girl too. And like I felt like when I moved to New York, I was like, I'm so tired of like dressing for like hot weather. I was like, I'm ready to wear coats and sweaters. As I say this, like I'm literally in a tube top, but like, it's like coats and sweaters and jackets and like leather, and like, so now it's like funny because I've been here for 10 years. I'm like, I want to go to the beach. I want to wear the bikini walking around New York. It's just like so funny because like I used to like hate summer clothes and now I'm like, let's be slutty and walk around the city. Yeah.
I very much feel that. I do enjoy the summer here, but I'm more of like winter fall for sure. Except
Yeah.
for
It's just like so beautiful. And like you don't get that in the South. It's just like, I mean, maybe like you said North Carolina. Sorry, is that where you're from?
yeah,
North Carolina definitely gets like some seasons, but like Florida, it's like hot as fuck and then like kind of hot, kind of cold, humid, not like that, like kind of what today's like, like 40 gross, but yeah, so no, that makes sense. So yeah, so you've been here for about a year and you moved here because like everything was like totally aligned with like you and your husband, which is like so perfect. And so like yeah, so how did you do the transition? Were you like trying to model up here before or did you know people? Like how was that for you?
a little bit of both. So I was already doing gigs up here, but it kind of got to a point where it was like, okay, so do we move and kind of like really lean into it, or do we just continue doing it as like a hobby, this like fun thing that, I do on occasion, but it's not like a really huge part of my life? Because I do really think to be in the industry, you have to be in an area where like the industry is thriving. It's really hard to live outside of that because you just hit a certain breaking point where it's like, okay, I can take this job and I can, go to New York and work this modeling gig tomorrow, but I'm going to have to hop on a red eye. I'm going
Mhm.
to have to like pay the premium of a day before flight and then also like whatever hotel. And then by the time you get paid from that gig you did, you're like barely breaking even. And
Mhm.
so you kind of just have to decide, do I actually want to do it really seriously or do I just want it to be, fun? And so for me, it's like I really do want to lean into it full force. And
Mhm.
then whenever Jordan, my husband, got the job, it was like, okay, let's really do it. Let's really give it a go. It's just kind of like flourished and it's been like a really beautiful process so far. I think like myself a year ago even would probably be very surprised where my current self is. I just feel very proud. I feel to like work around the people that I work around, to make the connections that I make. And I just feel like a big part of that is like really being authentic with people and really trying to make like genuine connections with people. Because
Mhm.
I found that, like, if you try to be anything else but yourself, it does come off as like being hard to make connections with those people. And so, a big
Mhm.
part of like me being successful, at least starting out, and I would say as well today, is just like really being genuine and trying to make those deep connections with people because I also did not have an agent when I first moved up here as well. So everything was very organic. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that kind of benefited me in a way because I've just like carried on with that. And it's made a big difference in my career, I feel, being able to actually like build relationships with people. And I've also like made some really unexpected friends along the way. Sometimes like
Mhm.
clients who book me like I'll go into it just thinking like, oh, it's another job. It'll be fun. I'm excited for it. And then you don't really expect to like come out with a friend, but sometimes you do. And that's a really big
Yeah.
thing.
No, it really is. And it's so nice to go from like, oh my God, the fashion industry, I don't know anybody there. And then you like, wait, I could show up at an event and I know this person, I know that person. And then you're building like a little network, you know? It's really cool. Yeah. So basically, like you moved here and then you started kind of like noticing, okay, I can like go after more gigs, or were you like just doing stuff solo and then you got the agency?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was doing it fully solo and I had gotten really successful at it, but I kind of felt like I wanted to take like the next step. Um, and I have had agents in the past. I just was going through like a span where I wanted to be freelance. And I feel that I was really successful being freelance, but I just kind of wanted like a little something more. I wanted to do like campaigns, I wanted to do bigger jobs, and I wanted to have more opportunities because I almost feel like signing with an agency, unless you just sign, and this is like very hypothetical, unless you just sign with like a really bad agency, it can only help you because it
Yeah.
can give you more opportunities.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario is you don't really get anything, and then you just kind of have that conversation with your agent, which is like, if I'm not working, you're not making money, so it's not
Yeah.
beneficial. So it can only help you, I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I was doing things freelance, and then I just decided to submit to some agencies and just see how it goes.
Yeah.
Um, and I just got really lucky after like a few. My mother agent actually like connected with me, and she was like, "Hey, like I really like your work. Let's meet and let's talk." And we really hit it off, and she signed me on the spot. I also felt like really grateful because of the type of like contract we were able to work out, because I feel sometimes with some agencies they want to give you like a 3 to 5 year kind of contract and like kind
Mm.
of lock you down. But the
Yeah.
thing about that is like if you're not getting anything, that's a long time to be locked down to somebody. And
Yeah.
I feel like whenever she and I were going through the terms, like she was just really approachable and like really good with working with me on finding like a middle ground. And that to me was like a huge green flag. So after signing with her, I got a couple cool opportunities, and then it kind of came to, okay, so we've got a mother agent. Now let's find you like a New York agent. Let's find you an agent and, an international agent. And so we started with the UK, and so far that's as far as we've gotten, but we are
Okay.
into getting me an agency and some representation in like Paris, maybe Milan. We'll see how that goes. But the nice thing about having one agent in Europe is it kind of opens the gateway for them to get you like more gigs, because you
Okay.
can apply for like working visas and they have connections in other countries. Because Europe is big, but like I would imagine when it comes to like the agency side of it, once you're there as an agent, like you can connect your talent with other people in other countries. So,
Yeah.
also, I am so sorry if you were hearing the ice cream truck coming down the
Oh,
road
it's good. It's New
in the
York City, baby.
pitch.
My window is right there, like first floor. Like we might hear the doo-doo, of the basement. So we were good.
Trust me, I tell.
Yeah. So just like curious, because I don't know so much on the model end. I know more of the design end. Like you say you have a mother agent. Like what, like maybe for someone who wants to like do exactly the steps, like what is a mother agent? Why do you need agents in different countries? Like what is that whole process?
Of course, yeah. No, the mother agent is kind of like, I like to think of it as like a little protective haven, and their job is kind of to make sure that when you get signed with a booking agent, because the mother agent is not typically a booking agent, so they're not going to like book you gigs necessarily. Sometimes they have opportunities that they can pass you, but for the most part, their job is to find you bigger opportunities with bigger agencies. Um,
Okay.
so if you start with a mother agent, just kind of go into it with the understanding that if you're not booking things through them, it's because that's not technically their role. You, as in like people who might be like tuning in, kind of thing.
No,
Um,
yeah, totally.
but yeah, no. So when you sign with the mother agent, they connect you with agencies in different regions. And depending on the agency that you sign with, like sometimes there are, let's use New York as an example, like you'll sign with an agency in New York and you really want to make sure when signing that like you super duper read the contract, because sometimes it'll be like, okay, I'm your New York agent and I'm going to book you things in like the tri-state area. And this is
Hmm.
where like, I represent you and I'll kind of like take control, not really take control, but like in a way, it's like oversee things for you in this area. But sometimes when you read the contract, even though it's an agency in New York, it'll say something about like, we have complete and total exclusive rights over your image, like
Mm,
worldwide. So you want to make sure, like when going through that, if you sign
gotcha.
in New York, yeah, that everything like aligns with what your goals are. Because for me, my New York agent like is for the tri-state area. So that means like, okay, I can find another agent in the UK or in, Paris, or just using those as examples. Just depending on who you sign with, you want to make sure that you really read those terms, because if you want multiple agencies in multiple countries, you don't want to have like conflicting contractual obligations, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, you don't want to like get an offer and then be like, oh, I can't actually do it or something, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that would be heartbreaking. But yeah, okay, so that's really cool. So it's basically like you kind of have like a network, like a web of like different people like trying to book you things. And that makes sense if you want to like walk in different, like, like Paris Fashion Week or London or whatever, you can kind of like get your thing out there. Yeah, that's great for like definitely like a starting like person, because we try to come from the perspective of like emerging or like starting off, because that's like a lot of the people who pay attention to the podcast, because it is like an offshoot of our networking night that we do. But yeah, so I'm always like, if you can do it, they can do it, you know what I mean? So that's kind of like the energy. So yeah, so basically now like you're in New York. Like, what do you think was like pivotal for like this motion forward where you're like, was it living here? Did you book one gig? Was it the agency? Like, what do you think is that big moment you're like, shit's starting to like move forward?
Oh, that's a good question. It's probably when I started booking like runway shows for bigger designers. I think this was prior to me living here, I came for a visit during New York Fashion Week, and I had one designer lined up that I was going to walk for. And this was like 2 years ago. Sometimes when you come into like the fashion weeks, you come into it a little bit blind, especially if you're freelance, which I was at the time.
Mm,
And so you just kind of go and you shoot your shot and you see what you book. And for me, I did the show for the one designer I had booked. And I had like this crazy makeup on. And I saw on Instagram that a designer I really wanted to work with was having like a pre show party. And I just really wanted to connect with them. So I went to the party and like got this crazy makeup on my face. And I was just like, hey, I'm a big fan of yours. I really want to walk for you at some point. And I kind of said it thinking to myself, I'm either going to come off like crazed or like narcissistic, but
mhm.
hopefully there's some part of what I'm saying that sounds genuine, because I am being, really genuine.
Yeah.
You never know how it's going to sound, like actually talking to the designer and also not knowing them personally. But for me, like I told her that, and she was like, "Oh, that's so cool. I actually recognize your face. You've submitted to me before in the past, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And
Oh,
then she told me like, "We're having a casting tomorrow if you want to come to it." And I was just so excited to be invited to something that I was like, "This is super cool." And I went to it really not thinking I was going to book it. I just wanted to go and just like make the connection. And then when I booked the show, actually, the person who texted me, it was one of her assistants, to let me know that I had booked the show. I was kind of thinking to myself, well, I posted this on my story, so let me make sure I'm not being like punked right now. Like somebody saw that I
yeah.
was casting and they're like, oh, yeah, you booked it. So I thought to myself, what can I ask them that only they would know? And that was, can you remind me of the location? Like, they told me, like, can you come for the fitting? And I'm like, cool. Can you remind me of the location? Is it the same as the casting? And it was. They gave me the exact address. So I'm like, okay, it must be real. Only they would know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was when I booked Alina Velez for the first time. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, I think that was the first time when I realized I was capable of more than I thought I was, because
Yeah.
starting off, I had been doing it for a while. I had been modeling on and off since I was a teenager, and I had other agents in the past, but you kind of go through phases where you're like, is this for me? Am I booking what I want to book? Like, am I as cool as I feel internally, outwardly, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So to get a really big show, I think that was the first time where I really had that aha.
Yeah. I mean, like as like an outsider, like I actually found your Instagram through the like Dune video, which we can like talk about at some point because I have a whole social media questions for you. But like I think like I was following you and maybe that hadn't happened yet or like it had happened, but I remember like the next time I checked in, I was like, oh shit, she's walking for her. That's so cool. And I think it does bring this like element of like this like new wave of like fashion. Like there's like these designers that have shown for like only a couple years in New York and they're like really cool and they're like not like any other of the people showing for New York Fashion Week. And I think it's like a really interesting time. And I was like, oh shit, like she's a part of that, you know? I was like, that's so cool. So I could definitely see that being like a leveling up like moment where you're like, okay, like and I think that's interesting that you say that because like as an outsider, like I felt that too, you know? Like the dial got turned up a little bit by being like, oh shit, and it's like that. It's because I unfortunately with fashion and social media, that's how it works, you know? The more like interesting I just dropped my earring, but the more interesting gigs, you know, the better it is for the job, obviously. Um, but yeah, no, that show was beautiful too. The like on the floor and like everything that was crazy.
It was, I think, the second show I did for her. And
Yeah.
that show was crazy cool. I've mentioned this, I think, on another podcast, but I'll say it again. Whenever they told us we were going to be wrestling in mud, I really thought it was going to be like the 1980s, like bikini, like
Oh,
mud
yeah.
wrestling.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was a really fun one because that was the image I had in my mind going into it. But they wanted us to be very serious and very intense, and not laugh. And so
Yeah.
that energy. But yeah, that was my first thought whenever they told us this is the
Oh
coolest
my gosh. I love that. Okay, cool. So yeah, so like, you know, I guess we can like pivot here. Like, so how this is what I notice as like a fashion person on the internet is like now if I'm seeing a model and they have like a fashion, like they have a social media persona, I feel like I'm curious how much that maybe as someone who like didn't have that and then someone who like now has that, like what do you think that means in terms of like getting you booked or like is it helpful? Like do they ask you if you have like a social media following? Like what are the whole crossover between modeling and social media? I'm going to grab my charger while you answer this.
Yeah, no, you're totally fine. That's a really good question. So there is some crossover. There are times when, let me put it this way. For me, it depends on the designer. Sometimes there are situations where they'll specifically ask you at a casting about your following and you just kind of spit out numbers. Usually, I would say, unless they're going to follow up with you and they really like you, if you just say out loud the amount of followers you have, unless they follow up with you, it doesn't really matter what you say. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously they're like looking for you to say a higher number.
Mhm.
And there's some correlation, but I feel like for the most part, it really just depends on like your vibe. When I go to a casting, most of the time when you go in, you just kind of come in with your comp card and your casting clothes, put the comp card down, and then they ask you some questions and you walk or you try something on. And so a lot of times in those instances, there's really no crossover with social media. But then there are times where designers will book me specifically based on my social media. Like maybe they found me online, reached out to my agency, and then like got the ball rolling. Or reach out directly to me and then I point them to the agency. And, in whatever order, there are definitely a lot of opportunities that come through social media because they'll find me through like a video or they'll be like, I really like that thing that you did for that one brand or for that one magazine cover or, something like that. So there's definitely a lot of crossover. Also, sometimes I've found like sometimes Instagram works as a model's portfolio.
Yeah.
Like, obviously clients do evaluate my portfolio like on my agency's websites, but there's just a lot of them too who will be like, oh, I'm really impressed by like, this one thing you posted. And they haven't even, maybe they've looked at my portfolio, but sometimes they give off the impression that they haven't, they've just looked at media. So it's kind of like a 50-50. It really
Yeah.
depends on the client, but there's definitely some crossover. I think the times when like social media really crosses over the most in real life for me is when I'm like, this is going to sound really pretentious, but I've had
No.
instances where I'm like walking down the street and somebody will be like, oh my God, I follow you on Instagram. Like just
Yeah.
walking down, I don't know, Madison or something like that. Or if I'm in like the Lower East Side. And yeah, and those moments are like really gratifying, but also you kind of have like a a little bit of an epiphany where it can really become real life if you play it the right way, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And it kind of ties back to that thing we were saying about like being authentic and being friendly and like being like, like yourself or whatever. And like, I think like the fashion industry, it's like, yeah, it can be really superficial, but at the end of the day, it kind of does come down to like if you are authentic and if people can relate to you and like if someone's like wants to hire you and hasn't even seen your portfolio, then they're like feeling that authentic nature of like your essence. They're like, no, that's the person I want because that's who I want in my clothes. It doesn't matter. Like, of course it's great, like, you got the look, you got whatever, but like, on top of it, I think it does add to like that element. And I do think it is like that like third heat, of like I'm really funny on the internet, and then I can also like slay. Like I follow this one model, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's like so goofy on the internet. And he's like in my basket, that guy. He's what's his name? I'll have to send it to you. He's like, what's in my basket? He's British. He's like, what's in my basket today or something. But then he's like slaying for like Prada, like you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my god, it's so funny.
Does he have red hair? I feel like I might
Yeah,
be talking about. Okay, yeah. I can't
yeah.
remember his name. I think he just walked for Versace this season.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
forget. We'll post it up here. But anyways, like just like really funny where I'm like, "Oh my God." Like it's just kind of an extra thing to your portfolio is like showing your personality, you know what I mean? Like
It
and
is.
being like, "Hey, like cuz I think your content is like really good. I mean, I've definitely like copied it cuz I'm like, "Oh, this seems like just not like don't think this the wrong way, but it's like it seems like really easy content to make cuz it's like life situation, video, text, and then you're doing your thing. And I'm like, well, I really like this POV or like, whatever skincare thing. I've like screenshotted it and then like the influencing is influencing is what I'm trying to say.
That's
Yeah.
that's very flattering because I mean, there's also like a little bit of a formula to it, but I feel like for the most part, maybe it like has a lot to do with TikTok, but people really do just want to see you being authentic for the most part. I've
Yeah.
honestly found that like the stuff that I spend like a crazy amount of time curating
Mm,
does not perform as well as stuff where it's just like in the moment.
yeah.
And yeah, if a psychologist has not studied why that is, they really should because it's
Yeah. No, they really should because honestly, I feel like the stuff that I just shit out and put on TikTok, like someone's like, you're an icon. Like that happened today. And I was like, oh my God, thank you. Thank you. But yeah, no, I do think that's like an interesting point is like it's like we can feel the other person's energy even through the screen. And like you can tell when someone's bullshitting or like editing too much or maybe cutting out parts because I think that's like we've had such a like edited marketing, like all this kind of stuff like our whole life that like when we see someone being real or like having like blemishes, like they're having a breakout but they're still doing a makeup thing, you're just kind of like, oh shit, I don't know, it does something like for sure to have that like authentic nature to social media. So, when did you start? Did you like have a day where you were like, I'm going to start taking social media seriously? Or like, what was your whole thought process for around?
honestly think I just had a day where I was like, I have a lot of videos and a lot of pictures that I just don't really do anything with. I don't know if you're like that as well, but sometimes I'll
Oh,
take
yeah.
pictures, videos in the moment, and I'm like, this just like lives in my phone and doesn't go anywhere. So I kind of just decided I would try curating it to be towards fashion. And it's funny because in the beginning, I feel like doing that, they really kind of flopped in the beginning. You post stuff and you're like, wow, this got like 1,000 views, and
Mhm.
this is who we are.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in that jail right now.
Yeah.
600 views on TikTok.
It just happens because I feel like you have to start somewhere. It's something like my husband always says to me that like I honestly it's become like my mantra. It's like you have to be really bad at something before you can be really good at something. And I kind of feel like that's where I started is just like posting stuff that was kind of so-so. And then as you go, you kind of find your niche
Mhm.
and lean more into like what works as like a formula for, what you're wanting to put out. Um, but yeah.
I think also too, it's like there's like, even though you're a model and you're not like camera shy, I feel like there's like, sometimes you can be like a little more shy on like when you're recording yourself talking or something. Let's say you like have to be like really comfortable, like especially in a place like New York, there's a million people around. We don't have the luxury of like a good car video, you know, like if like you're feeling awkward, it's so obvious. Like, and then you're like, someone walks by, you're like, turn it off. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you have to really like develop the not giving a fuck, or else what's the point of taking the video? It's like trash at that point, you know?
You have to be careful though, because like I've had instances where I've gotten a little too comfortable, and then I'm like, oh, that guy looks like he's trying to like scope me out to steal my phone. I've sat it down one, two, three times.
Oh my gosh, you had to do like a fit check. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you sit it in the little like windowsill, and the next thing you know, it's like, why is that? Oh, I got it. Okay.
Oh my God, imagine it's like recording the whole time. That would actually be like a really funny video, but like unfortunate. But yeah, so okay, cool. No, I just really appreciate like the whole social media model like component, because you know, when mostly people see you, it's like looking like, you know, just like this kind of like unattainable, like, because I remember when I was in school and they were talking to us about getting models, they're like, the reason why they look like, you know, unbothered, they don't care about you, is because like you want to be their friend. You know what I mean? Like that's like what you want to look for, is someone that like makes you want to be like, well, you don't give a fuck about me, but like I want to be your friend and I want those clothes, you know? Like that's what one of my teachers.
That's so funny. I've heard this compared to cats. You know how with
Yeah.
cats, if you try to show them affection, they're like, but if you act like you don't care about them, cats will just kind of
Yeah.
that.
Mine is too. I mean, she's, yeah. No, it is literally like that. So, did you like for runway, did you like, how did you learn to like walk, or like, because I did a runway once and it was like so hard. I was like, it was very hard. But, you know, I imagine like, because if you only got like twice a year practice or something, it could be like a little intimidating. Like, how'd you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, this is a really horrifying answer. I feel like some of the agents that I was signed with when I was much younger, like as a teenager, when I did not have a backbone, they they were not the nicest people. So like when you would do like runway boot camps, you would kind of just get it like drilled, like this is how you're supposed to walk, you know, do it again, do it again, do it again. And like you kind of have to just do it until you get good at it.
Mhm.
Um, Something that I feel like for newer models who are really feeling like their walk is just not good, because like when you start, it's not going to be good. Like get to a certain point, I would recommend just propping your phone up and just recording yourself like over and over and over until like when it looks good on camera, it's probably going to look good in real life, you know? And I've seen, I think it's like, what is that person's name?
The blonde model that did this stuff in the public. What is it? We'll pop it up on the screen too. Yeah.
Yeah, but that model's incredible. But they do a lot of like side by sides where they'll show you how to walk like Kate Moss, or how to walk like, you know, this
Yeah.
person, that person. And that method actually works really well for like real life application. You know, like if you're going to castings and they're telling you again and again, like, oh, I need you to walk like a 90s supermodel. That was like a big fad for a while there, more like last year than this year. But, you know,
Huh.
they'll have like really specific requests, and like queuing something like that up and watching it and then just recording yourself and doing side by sides, you know, not necessarily to post if that's not something you're comfortable with, but more or less just to kind of give yourself a vantage point of how to get good at it. That can really help, because you can see like in real time, okay, her hips are moving like this, mine
Yeah.
moving like, you know, more like this. Like how can I?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So are there like other things that you need to know just like on the top of your head? Like you need to know these runway walk. Like what are other like things that you're like, oh, this is what I need to have in my Rolodex in case I get asked, or
Oh my gosh. It's such a mixed bag, because sometimes they'll really catch you off guard. Like
Mhm.
I've gone to castings before where they've been like, and it gets even more interesting when there's a language barrier, because sometimes the way they're explaining something is not actually like necessarily what they're wanting, just because like the words are not, you know, it's not meaning the same thing that they think it means, or vice versa. But I've been to castings where they're like, we want you to walk like snaky, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
sultry. And so like I do a sultry walk, and they're like, no, like snaky. And I'm like, okay, so in like a zigzag. And they just kept saying like, no, snaky. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying my best to do everything snaky means. And clearly you don't hate me because that's a good sign if they're giving you multiple tries. Because if you do it once and you do it wrong and they're like, okay, thank you, it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I get that. But they gave me multiple tries. And yeah, in the end, they wanted me to like move the upper part of my
What?
body, which was weird. I did not end up saying yes to that gig because I was like, this isn't quite on par with, like the type of stuff that I would usually say yes to, but it was an experience. And yeah, you get asked to do all kinds of things. I have a reel I think I made like either earlier this year or like the end of last year, and it was joking about like, when they tell you they want you to walk slow but fast, sexy but serious, demure but this, and that is like a big thing. They'll give you very conflicting instructions sometimes, and like it's funny at the end of the day. And if it's not funny, then it's like a serious thing and you book it. And yeah, it's always a mixed bag. So yeah, you just kind of have to, in the moment, it's like if you're good at improv acting, you can be good at anything.
Interesting. Yeah, because I guess you have to just turn it on, You're like, okay, this is the moment. I'm gonna be a snake now for you. I love that. So what did you like better, New York Fashion Week or London Fashion Week?
Oh man, this is a tough one. So I feel like for me, I have a lot more experience with New York and a lot more connections and a lot more people that, I would consider again, like there are also people like that I work with, but then they're also like friends. And so there's a lot of overlap in like relationships. And I feel like going to London, all of that kind of dissipated because it was like stepping into a totally new world. There were a few casting agents that I already knew because they have crossover in New York. But for the most part, it was kind of like brand new because I had never done London Fashion Week before. So for me, it's so hard to compare only because I feel like I would probably need to do London Fashion Week again to get like a
Mhm.
true feel for it.
Yeah.
But it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they're different because you have like New York is such a home base that you're just kind of like you know how to get around, you know what you're doing, you know who you're going to run into, but then London's like so new and like I mean that could be really exciting too because then the next time you go you're like, "Oh shit, I ate at this cafe." I mean like that's big for me to just like know where to get food.
No, I completely agree. Yeah, and I think this go round or like next season, if I decide to do London, which I'm almost feeling like I might want to because of the way they're laid out, I might want to do like Milan, Paris, New York.
Mhm.
Not that they'll be in that order, but yeah, I think this go around, it kind of I didn't realize going straight from New York Fashion Week into London Fashion Week was going to be
Yeah.
the like, because
It's kind of crazy.
you think it will be, but then when you're actually doing it, you have the realization of like, okay, so like no sleep, bus, club, another club. It's like
Yeah.
the Gaga thing.
Yeah. No, literally. So like you ended New York Fashion Week and then literally just got on a plane.
Yeah. So I did 8 shows during New York Fashion Week. And on my last day, which was actually like probably my heaviest show day, I had 2 shows. And as soon as the second one ended, I had to run home because I realized I didn't print my like visa paperwork because you have to have like authorization to work. And so I ran home, printed it, and then like took a Uber to JFK and then got straight on the plane and went straight to London. And then as soon as I landed, my agent had like 4 different castings sent to me and was like, "Yep, like go ahead and like hit the ground running." And I had to go get my comp cards, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. So
Yeah.
fun.
No, I love that. It's like literally like wake like doing it, like you're doing it.
Yeah,
Oh, I love that. So, what were all the shows you did in New York? You said you did 8?
yeah, yeah. So I did. Let me think about this. I feel like my mind always goes
Or
blank.
what was the most standout one? Like what for like good or bad reasons? Like what do you think about when you remember that Fashion Week?
Oh, this is such a tough question because I
Sorry.
They're no, you're fine, you're fine. They're all really incredible shows, but for really different reasons.
Mhm.
Some of the standout ones for me, because like some of them were like dream shows for me.
Mhm.
Walking for Milena Baumeister was something that I have wanted to do for a while. This is actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was their debut runway show because they always show a collection, but it seems like it's usually in like lookbook format. It's like if you go on the runway, it's like lookbook, like continuously. And then they did a runway show for the first time this year. And like to be part of that was really special. I had never walked a show with like, this is not the reason that you walk shows by any means, but it's like something cool that just kind of happens. I had never walked a show with major celebrities before.
Mm-hmm.
Offset walked Melissa's show, so that was really cool. Like having him close, and yeah, that was just really interesting. As I say that out loud, I am thinking back to some of the other shows I've walked before, and they have had like pretty big people in them. But like, yeah, that was just a really incredible, very high caliber show. And then I also that same day I had Jane Wade. Jane is amazing. Like there's there are certain teams that you work with and you just click with them and you feel very at home with them right from the get-go. And there are multiple people on her team who used to work with like Elena Velez's team, and they kind of have either transitioned over or there's some like in between. And so you've got people that like you have familiarity with, and there's a lot of comfort in that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Jane Wade was a really amazing. Melita was amazing. Eric Barshai was amazing. That show was crazy because the dress I wore was completely made of hair.
Oh yeah.
It was crazy cool. Like right before the show, honestly, props to them because I don't think I have the nerves for it. Like I feel like I would be in shambles as a designer. But like they built that dress on me like an hour or two before the show started. So the
Oh
dress
well.
being pieces of hair, laying out on a table to actually being applied to my body and then like adhered down. And that was such a cool process. And also just like a really incredible garment because the wig that they put on me, they cut it to be in a mullet style and then it like wriggled into the dress. And so it was
Cool.
supposed to be like fluid hair, like body, like soul and mind, head to toe. And it was just the most incredible look. So yeah, those three shows, those were actually three of my last shows. I think I'm just remembering them like backwards
Mhm.
going through.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this one. Yeah, no. So then it was like you had these three like pivotal, like where you're like, oh shit, this is like big deal. Like, I love this. And then you're like literally getting on a plane. What was your favorite show in London?
Ooh, probably Leo Prothman. That one was incredible because Leo, to start with, is just a lovely, lovely human being. The casting director for that particular show, I knew the casting director. So again, that was kind of cool to have like the overlap. We never worked together before, but like I knew them through projects of like mutuals. And then, yeah, like Leo did, if I'm not mistaken, a collab with Rick Owens on shoes, and the boots are called Kiss boots, and I think it kind of refers to like the style. They do look very Kiss-esque,
Hmm.
like the band Kiss. And that was incredible because I actually got to wear a pair of those boots for the show. And so you kind of have this moment where like you feel connected to like higher power or something. It's really
Yeah.
cool to work with people who do collaborative projects like that with like other major people and yeah, just a lot of talented individuals. So I felt very lucky to be part of that one. Leo's was definitely a favorite.
Oh, I love that. Like what are you trying to like call in for like next fashion week? Like what are your like dream gigs? Or like what are you like writing down being like come to me?
Yeah. I mean, I would love to do some of like the tip top shows. Like Dior would be amazing, Gucci would be amazing. I would love to do Rick Owens at some point. It's funny, a lot of people ask me like, "Are you doing Paris Fashion Week?" And some of my friends were like, "Are you going to Rick's, casting on Sunday?" And I wasn't doing Paris this season just because like I've got a sprinkle in of like a day job now, and like my day job was kind of like time to come home type vibes. And
Mm-hmm.
but it's like cool to just have moments like that. And I really would love to work with Rick Owens at some point. That would be so amazing.
Yeah. No, definitely. I feel like that's like a lot of people's like dream, like designer, stylist, model, like, you name it. They're like, oh yeah, this would be like a big deal. Well, I mean, I guess if you plan it right, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to get in there and then he would be like, that's the look, I could see it.
I think I've noticed too, I tend to gravitate towards designers who have a really fascinating array in their cast. Like people are not necessarily all the same measurements, heights, ages, looks. Like it's people who were very much like varying across the board. Like Melissa's show, they had people who were in the show who were like in their 60s and like
Mhm.
just stunning individuals and like really striking faces. And there's something to me about having a wide range in the diversity of the cast, the age of
Mhm.
the cast, that I feel like adds so much zest to the show. And I think that's also something that Rick does really well.
Yeah. Do you feel like people are trying to like diversify more, or do you think there's like some brands where you're like, I'm not even gonna try with that?
I think it depends. It depends on the designer. It depends on what their vision is. I definitely saw some shows during London Fashion Week where like some of the people are very much like I would say no older than 18, 19. And then you
Mhm.
have shows where it varies and you have like a really wide range. It's so dependent on the designer, I feel, which is a really convoluted answer, but I think it's accurate.
Yeah. No, I for sure. I mean, and also it's like knowing like for instance, if I were to model, I would be like, oh, this person would never cast like tattoos or something like that, like and just kind of like knowing the branding and like obviously it's like you don't want to like set yourself up for like wasted time and effort and stuff like that. So I imagine it's like a little bit of like knowing your personal branding and knowing if like that aligns with like the designer or something. Like maybe you could be surprised, but I mean, I would be surprised if I booked like, something really preppy. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like off the top of my
Well, I will say though, to add to that, sometimes you go to castings and you'll go in knowing like I'm probably not going to book this because it's not exactly my branding. And then you leave and the casting director just remembers you because, for whatever reason you stood out to them. And then even though you might not book that gig, they'll remember you for a future opportunity. I've
Mm.
had that happen so many times, so many, so
Oh,
many times. And that's a good feeling too, because like it's very rewarding to feel like you made an impression and then also to kind of have that. I don't know, it's like the good vibes coming back around or something, like you put out the good energy and it comes back to you kind of thing.
yeah.
So it's like even though would probably never book Ralph Lauren, I'd love to, but I know myself and I know my branding, I know they probably wouldn't book me. I would hope that the casting director would be like, yeah, we remember Riely and I'm gonna put her on this edgy thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, I could totally see that. It's just kind of like it still widens your approach. It's not like people are gonna be like, you came to this casting, like what? Like, and like punish you for it or something. I feel like that's fashion like 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, even if you go, let's say you like really majorly embarrass yourself in front of the casting director or the casting just really goes badly, like unless you just do a huge faux pas of something that's just like absurd or super rude, if you're fine. There's no downside to going, I feel. It's getting your face out there, it's getting people to remember you. And sometimes I've seen people do like really crazy things in castings or like accidents that happen in castings and then like they book the gig because of that because they stood out.
Yeah. Yeah, like a kind of like I think it comes back to being authentic. If it's like not weird, then like it might actually make you like rememberable.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think time it can play to your detriment is if you're just rude. Those are the people who tend to not get booked because I've seen like with really major people they don't tend to have any kind of like a cattiness or like an attitude because they're already at the tippy top, and there's no reason for them to be anything but kind. And I feel like kind people just like succeed and they go far. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, honestly, like if you were to tell like any like younger or like anyone starting out, like what would you tell them? Like what would be like your number one advice tip?
Number one advice tip would be take every networking opportunity you can get. So, whether that's like a party, whether that's going with a friend to something, whether it's, if it's in the fashion industry, obviously, like use your judgment on what part of the fashion industry you're trying to get into. But I really think that any networking opportunity is a good opportunity. Just go be nice to people. A part of that, don't go and get drunk at parties like that. If you go to a networking opportunity or if you go to a party to meet people and to grow your career, have that in the back of your mind. Definitely be professional the whole time. But yeah, take every opportunity you can to network with people and to connect with people because yeah, that's how we grow, I feel too. And like sometimes you just meet people and whether or not you have like opinions that align or maybe they're completely the opposite, like being able to learn from each other can only like grow you in your career. Yeah, network.
Yeah, networking. I mean, I totally agree. Like even on like the non-model end, it's like people, it's such a small industry and like people, especially if you're doing it on social media too, like people will definitely be like, "Oh, I know that person." And I mean, I feel like I'm in a very weird spectrum because I'm like designer, trying to be an influencer, trying to like interview people backstage. I don't know. Like it's like a whole thing. I'm on a whole journey right now. I'm trying like not to design, but like it's like I do notice like the people that are like gatekeepy or weird or like, you know, don't talk to you in the line for the runway show or something. And it's just like, we're all here, you know, like let's all just be friendly together, you know, like
And what you said is so accurate. It is such a small industry. Like, I think sometimes it's easy to forget that. But, like, for instance, when I was at the Leo Prothman casting in London, I had just tried on an outfit and someone came through the door and I was like, wow, I really recognize that person. How do I know that person? And they were like, yeah, we're just fitting the model. Like, if you'll just step back out, like, you can come back in just a second. And then when I walked out, I realized it was somebody that I had walked a show with in New York City who was there for a casting in London. So it's such a small world. We
yeah.
all involved in the same universe. So yeah, it's something that I never mean to get preachy about, but I do really try to drive it home with people is that, you know, if you even think for like a second that you can kind of be a little high and mighty, like just humble yourself really quickly because it will always come back to bite you because people remember who's nice to them and who's not.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, so I think we're kind of like organically wrapping up. Like, is there anything that you're like working on that you want to talk about or like share or like any exciting news?
Well, I just had a publication with Elle come out. I posted about that the other day, so I was really excited about that.
Yeah,
Um,
me.
I have a few publications that are coming out in the next like few days because they're not released. I don't want to say like the names of like,
Yeah, just
but
keep tuned on Instagram.
stay tuned. Just stay tuned. I did Jane Wade like the audit is what her show was called, and I did the campaign for her. So I'll be posting like all of the campaign videos soon, which are really cool. So like keep an eye out for those. That was really fun to shoot, and yeah, it's
I love it.
I'm trying to think of anything else I have on the horizon to share, but I feel like most of it I can't really say until it's out. So just keep an eye.
No, totally. Lots of good things coming, and we'll all find out in real life on the real time. Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Like, this literally was such a good podcast. And I think it's like a lot of people can learn from your experience, but also find it just like generally interesting and like exciting. And, you know, it's definitely like a step in the right direction for anybody that like needs a little motivation or, you know, wants to put themselves out there, you know. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime. All right. Well, have a good night.
You as well. Bye.